The CB radio knew my name before I spoke there, is a superstition among long-haul drivers about CB radios that the younger generation of truckers dismisses as folklore, and the older generation keeps to themselves like a scar they don't show company. The superstition goes like this. A CB radio, used long enough on the same roads, begins to know things, not in the way of a machine processing data, in the way of a thing that has absorbed enough human desperation and human loneliness and human prayer from the cab to develop something that resembles, in the dark, at speed, in the small hours of a night run, a kind of awareness. I drove with my father's CB for 6 years before I understood what he meant when he gave it to me and said, "Take care of it, and it'll take care of you." The radio was a Cobra 148 GTL, produced in 1981, the year before I was born. My father had run it on his rig from 1983 until he retired in 2009, which meant the radio had 26 years of his voice in it, 26 years of his check-ins and his weather calls and his conversations with other drivers on the overnight corridors of the American interstate system. He talked to it the way some men talk to God, not expecting a response exactly, but expecting to be heard. He gave it to me on a Tuesday morning in the Denny's parking lot outside Calvert, handing it across the table of the booth with the ceremony of a man transferring something he considered important. "It'll surprise you," he said. "Pay attention when it does." I ran the Cobra for 6 years, and it did not surprise me. It functioned as a CB radio functions, static, channel chatter, the occasional useful road condition from a southbound driver. I paid attention the way my father had asked me to, and found nothing that warranted special attention. Then, on a November night in the 7th year at mile 88 on Route 7, the radio said my name. Not my handle. I use southbound on the CB, the way most drivers use a handle rather than their name. Not my handle. My name, my full name, first and last, in a voice that I knew and could not place, the voice of something familiar heard from a distance. Marcus Reeves. I had not keyed the mic. I had not spoken. Channel 19 had been quiet for 40 miles. No traffic, no weather. The kind of radio silence that settles on a night highway when the trucks are spread thin and no one has anything to say. My name, from my father's radio on an empty channel at 2:17 a.m. I picked up the handset. My hand was steady. I am not a man who frightens easily, and I had driven too many dark highways to have much room left for the theatrical variety of fear. "I'm here," I said. Static, long, low static. Then, stay on 7. Don't take the 44 connector. The 44 connector was my planned shortcut, a county road that cut 20 minutes off the run in good conditions. I had been planning to take it at mile 100. I took this route regularly. "Why?" I said. "Nothing, channel static." I keyed the mic again. "Who is this?" The static shifted. The quality of it changed, the way the quality of silence changes when a room is not empty. Not words. Something in the frequency beneath the static that I associated, without being able to say why, with my father's voice. The timbre of it. The specific frequency his voice had always occupied. My father was alive. He was home in Calvert, retired, watching the late news and falling asleep in his chair. I had spoken to him 3 days ago. He was fine, but the radio had 26 years of him in it. I did not take the 44 connector. At mile 100, I stayed on Route 7 and drove the long way, the 20 minutes longer way, thinking about my father's voice in a frequency I could not name, and a warning I had no reason to follow, except that I had followed it. At mile 118, southbound traffic on Route 7 slowed, and then stopped. I sat in the line for 45 minutes while emergency vehicles worked the connector junction. A county road accident, I learned from another driver on the CB who had come from that direction. A semi had jackknifed on the 44 connector at approximately 2:30 am, which was the time I would have been on it if I had taken the shortcut. I sat in the stationary traffic and held the CB handset and said quietly to my father's radio, "Thank you." The static shifted again. That same quality, the timbre, the frequency. Not words, but heard. I called my father the next morning, told him what had happened. He was quiet for a long moment. "Did you thank it?" he said. "Yes." "Good." He paused. "It doesn't need much, just to be listened to. That's all any of us need." I run the Cobra 148 GTL to this day. It sits in my cab on its mount, its volume knob worn to smooth metal from 39 years of adjustment, its casing carrying the specific scratches and fading of a life of work. Channel 19 is mostly quiet on my runs, but on certain nights, at certain miles, on certain stretches of dark highway when the conditions are right, when I am tired enough to listen past the noise, attentive enough to hear what the static contains, the radio speaks. Not always words, sometimes just the quality of a presence, the frequency of someone who drove these roads for 26 years and left enough of himself in the equipment to fill the worst silences with something better than silence. My father's radio knows my name. I have made my peace with that. I have made my peace, in fact, with more than that. With the possibility that the tools we use long enough and honestly enough become, in some way that physics does not account for, familiar with us. That the Cobra 148 GTL, after 26 years of one man's voice and 7 years of his son's, knows the difference between ordinary static and the kind that carries a warning. My name, in the dark, at mile 88. Stay on 7. I stayed. I'm still here to say that I stayed. IU. Every time I passed mile marker 66, someone appeared in my mirror the first time I wrote it off as road fatigue. The second time I pulled over. The third time I started keeping a log. By the 7th time I had a notebook with 7 entries, each one describing the same experience in slightly different words, and I had shown the notebook to exactly one person. A driver named Pete Caruso, who had been running Route 12 longer than I had, and Pete had read every entry without expression, and then handed the notebook back and said, "Yeah, mile 66 does that." I will describe the experience as I described it in my log, because the log is more precise than my memory has become with time, and precision matters here. First occurrence, March 14th, northbound on Route 12, passing mile marker 66 at approximately 1:40 am. I glanced in my driver's side mirror as a matter of habit, the standard mirror check I perform every 60 to 90 seconds on a night run. The mirror showed the road behind me, which should have been empty. The road had been empty for the previous 20 miles. In the mirror, in the passenger side of my cab, visible through the rear window, was a figure. A man, sitting in the passenger seat. Dark coat, light-colored shirt visible at the collar, head turned slightly as though looking at the road to his right. Profile view. Clear enough that I registered the specific angle of his jaw, the shape of his shoulder. I looked directly into the cab. Empty passenger seat. Nothing, back to the mirror. Empty cab interior visible through the rear window. I continued driving. At mile 70, I stopped at the emergency lane and walked around the truck. Cab empty. Sleeper empty. Nothing. Second occurrence 3 weeks later. Same mile marker. Same approximate time, 1:43 am. Same mirror check. Same figure. This time, I was ready enough to observe more carefully. Dark coat. White or light-colored shirt. The figure's posture relaxed. not tense. Not threatening in any posture I could read. Looking at the road. I spoke aloud in the cab, "Who are you?" The figure in the mirror did not react. It continued to look at the road. I looked directly at the passenger seat. Empty. Back to the mirror, still there for another 4 or 5 seconds. Then gone. I pulled over. I sat for 15 minutes and thought about what I was doing with my life and my mirrors and my night runs on Route 12. By the 7th occurrence, I had developed a protocol. I would approach mile 66 with the mirror already angled for the best view of the passenger seat's rear window. I would check at the marker. I would observe for as long as the figure remained. I would note details in my log. The details accumulated across 7 sightings: dark coat, consistently, light shirt. The figure was male, appeared middle-aged, always in the passenger seat. Always looking at the road, not at me, not at anything in the cab, at the road ahead. The posture varied slightly between sightings, sometimes more upright, sometimes more relaxed, but the fundamental position was the same. A passenger. Riding. After my conversation with Pete Caruso, who confirmed the experience without explaining it, I went looking for Route 12 history. I was not a man who had previously looked for road history, but the notebook had changed my relationship to the question of what roads contain. I found, in a regional newspaper archive, a reference to a fatal accident on Route 12 at mile 66. Dated 1987, a 2-vehicle collision, a northbound commercial truck and a passenger car. The truck driver survived. The passenger car had 2 occupants, one survived and one did not. The one who did not was the passenger, a man named David Okafor, 41, described in the brief notice as a commercial sales representative who had been riding with a colleague. 41. Middle-aged. A passenger. I drove Route 12 northbound the following week. I approached mile 66 with my mirror correctly angled. I checked at the marker. The figure was there, dark coat, light shirt, looking at the road. I spoke to the mirror, not loudly, in the tone I would use to speak to a passenger. "I see you," I said. "You can ride." The figure remained for longer than any previous sighting. Nearly 30 seconds, I counted. Then gone. I have driven Route 12 northbound perhaps 200 times since. The figure appears at mile 66 perhaps 1 time in 3. Not every run, not on a schedule I have been able to predict. But when it appears, I speak to the mirror. I say the same thing each time. "I see you." You can ride. Pete Caruso told me, when I mentioned this, that it was the right thing to do. Some of them just want to know they're visible, he said, that somebody sees them still on the road, still going somewhere. David Okafor, 41, commercial sales representative, last northbound on Route 12 in 1987. I see him. He can ride. I think that is the least the road asks of the living, to acknowledge the ones who are still on it. E3. The last delivery was to a town that doesn't exist. I took the job because I needed the money and because the rate was exceptional. Twice the normal per mile for a single delivery to a rural address. The kind of rate that makes a driver ask questions and then decide not to ask them. The shipper was a company called Aldous Forwarding, which I had not worked with before, but which appeared legitimate in the carrier directory. The consignee address was in a town called Varden, which my GPs found without hesitation and placed approximately 90 miles north of my depot on a county road off Route 7. I picked up the load, a single wooden crate, approximately the size of a steamer trunk, weight logged at 312 pounds, at a warehouse in the west quarter of the city. The dock crew was efficient and uncommunicative. The crate was loaded and strapped the paperwork handed to me, and I was waved out of the bay before I had a chance to examine the manifest in detail. In the cab, reading the manifest, I found that the commodity code was listed as personal effects, miscellaneous. The declared value was 0. The delivery instructions said, "Leave at front door. Signature not required." I drove north on Route 7. 90 miles in good conditions. The GPS directed me to the county road exit at mile 84, which I took, and then along a county road for 6 miles, and then onto a smaller road whose surface changed from asphalt to packed gravel as I followed it north. I want to describe what I saw as I entered Varden, because the description is where the account becomes difficult. I saw a town, 2 streets, a main commercial street and a residential street running parallel, with the structures you would expect in a small rural community: a general store, a post office, a diner, a church, a fire station, houses behind them extending back from the road, trees, street lighting. Everything a town is. Everything looked correct from a moving vehicle at night, which is an important qualification. The more I slowed, the more I noticed that the town had a quality I can only describe as almost right. The diner's sign was lit, but the font was wrong. Not wrong in a modern graphic design way, but wrong in the way of something that had been reproduced from memory without the original to check against. The post office had a flag that hung without moving in a night when there was wind. The houses had lights in their windows, but the light had no source I could identify. It was flat, undirectional, the way light in a painting is light without being cast by anything. The address on the manifest was 4 Harrow Street. My GPS directed me to it without hesitation: a white house on the residential street, 2 stories, a covered porch. I pulled to the front and sat in the idling truck and looked at the house. The house was right in the same way the town was right. Almost, I got out. I carried the crate to the front door. It was heavy for its size. Those 312 pounds dense and evenly distributed in a way that suggested its contents were one solid object rather than many loose ones. I set it on the porch. As I straightened from setting the crate down, the front door opened. A woman stood in the doorway. Older, perhaps 70, in a house dress, with the specific stillness I had been noticing in everything about this town, present but not animated. The way a very good photograph of a person is present without being alive. "You're here," she said. "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Delivery from Aldous." She looked at the crate for a long moment. "Is this everything?" "Everything listed on the manifest," I said. She looked up at me. Her eyes were the thing that was most right about her, the most fully present thing in the whole town. "Thank you for coming all this way," she said. "People don't usually find us." "The GPS had it," I said. "Yes," she said. "It does lately. We've been working on that." She picked up the crate, all 312 pounds, without apparent effort, which was the moment I decided not to say anything further and to return to my truck. I drove back to the county road. At the junction where the small gravel road met the county road, I looked in my mirror at the town behind me. There was no town. There was a field, dark, flat, agricultural, extending to the tree line. No streets, no lights, no structures. I have searched for Varden in every database I know. The town is not in any state registry, any county record, any historical directory. The address, 4 Harrow Street, Varden, returns no results. Aldous Forwarding is not in the carrier directory I found them in when I searched again. The listing is gone. What I have is the delivery receipt, which I signed myself as proof of delivery since signature was not required, and the memory of a woman with present eyes who said people don't usually find us, and who carried 312 pounds without effort. and the specific smell that came from the open doorway when she stood in it. Old paper and something floral. The smell of a place that has been long inhabited and long closed, and that opens, very occasionally, when something that belongs to it finds its way home. I think the crate contained something that had been somewhere it shouldn't be, for longer than it should have been, and Varden, whatever Varden is, arranged for its return. I was the driver. I drove. It was the last delivery I made for Aldous Forwarding, because Aldous Forwarding is no longer findable. But it was not the worst job I ever took. It was, in its way, the most complete one. Something went home. In this work, that is always the job. IV. My logbook recorded stops. I never made. A driver's logbook is a legal document and a personal record simultaneously, a thing that must be accurate to the standard of federal regulation, and that also, over time, becomes a kind of autobiography. I have kept paper logs for 12 years because I prefer the physical record. The handwriting that changes slightly with fatigue and weather, and the particular quality of a night. The pen pressure that tells you something about the state of the man who wrote the entry. My logs are 12 years of nights on the road, rendered in entries. The entries I did not write began appearing in the 9th year. I noticed the first one on a Monday morning, reviewing my previous week's log before a audit prep. It was in my handwriting, unmistakably, the same pen pressure and letter formation and specific idiosyncrasies that I know as well as I know my face. But I had not written it. The entry was for the previous Thursday, which had been a rest day. My legitimate Thursday entry showed off-duty status for the full 24 hours. I had been home. My wife was home. The truck had been in the driveway. The entry below mine, in my handwriting, recorded a 6-hour on-duty driving period from a depot in Farwell to a delivery address in Clement, with specific odometer readings and a rest stop logged at mile 78. I had not been to Farwell in 3 years. I had never delivered to the Clement address. I took the page out of the logbook. I kept it. I filled in a replacement from a blank page. The second entry appeared 2 weeks later. A rest day again. A driving record in my handwriting for a run I had not made. Different route, different delivery, but the same quality, my handwriting, my specific notation style. The way I always put a small circle at the end of my odometer readings, that is purely habitual, and that I could not stop doing if I tried. By the 5th entry I had a pattern. They always appeared on rest days. They were always complete and procedurally correct, compliant with hours of service regulations, realistic in their timing and mileage. They were the logs of a driver who knew how to log correctly. I had the entries analyzed. I know a forensic document examiner. She confirmed what I already knew. The handwriting was mine, not copied, not forged. Mine, the pen angle, the pressure distribution, the specific movement patterns of my particular hand, formed over 12 years of logging. "These are your entries," she said. "I didn't write them," I said. She looked at me steadily. "Then something that writes exactly like you did." I began to investigate the runs recorded in the mystery entries. The depot in Farwell was real, a legitimate distribution center. The Clement delivery address was a real address, a medical supply company. I called them. The Clement company had records of a delivery on the date in my mystery entry. A truck. A driver who had signed the receipt. They offered to email me the scanned receipt. The signature on the receipt was mine. I want to be precise about my response to this information. I was not frightened. I was something more complicated than frightened. I was confronted with evidence that on my rest days, something in my handwriting was making runs I had no memory of, and delivering loads that needed delivering and signing receipts at the end. The loads arrived. The signatures cleared. Someone was doing the work. I started leaving a note in my logbook on rest day mornings. A simple note, tucked between the pages. Rest day. I am home. Please tell me where you're going. The note was never answered in the logbook. But the entries continued, and beginning with the entry after I left the first note, each one had an addition I had not previously noticed. In the remarks column, which I usually left blank, a single word. The first word, north. The next entry, south, then north. Then, the run you did in 16, I know it. I had driven a particular run in 2016, a long haul that had taken me through 4 states and had been, for reasons I won't fully describe, the hardest run of my career. A run during which I had made decisions I was not proud of, and through which I had arrived at something I considered a personal reckoning. Whatever was logging my rest days knew that run, knew it specifically enough to reference it. I wrote back, in the margin of the logbook, "Who are you?" The next mystery entry's remarks column read, "You know who I am. I'm the one who keeps driving. I do know who that is. I have driven 12 years, and in 12 years of night roads, there is a version of me that has never stopped, that is always on some road, always running some load, always covering the miles that the waking, domestic, rest day me is not covering. The part that formed in the years of long hauls and that cannot stop the way the rest of me can stop. On my rest days, that part drives. On my work days, I look at the log and see my handwriting, and I know which entries are mine and which are his. The driver I also am, the one who keeps going. I no longer remove his entries. They are part of the record. Some miles get driven by the part of you that can't rest. I have made my peace with that. I think he has too. V. The woman at the truck stop had been dead for 20 years. I need to begin with what I knew about Linda Marsh before I met her, which is nothing, because I did not know her name until after the encounter. What I knew at the time was a woman at the counter of the Route 9 truck stop at 2:30 a.m. who ordered black coffee and asked if she could sit in the booth across from me because the place was cold and the corner booths were drafty and I was in the warmest spot near the back. Sure, I said, because it was 2:30 a.m. and she was ordinary looking and the truck stop was quiet. And I was the kind of tired that is comfortable rather than dangerous, and I had no reason to say no. She was 40, perhaps, or looked 40, the particular age that some women carry in a way that is neither young nor old but settled. The age of someone who has arrived at who they are. She wore a heavy canvas jacket and had a bag on the seat beside her, and she held the coffee cup in both hands, the way people hold hot things in cold places. She looked at the road through the window. We didn't speak for a few minutes. Truck stop silence at 2:30 a.m. is its own kind of comfortable. The coffee machine cycling, the occasional radio from the kitchen, the distant sound of the highway. Long run? She said. Long enough, I said. You? I'm between things, she said. This is a phrase that means many things at 2:30 a.m. in a truck stop. I did not ask what it meant for her. We talked easily, the way strangers talk when they are both awake at an hour that selects for a particular kind of person. She asked about my route, and I told her. She knew the road, knew Route 9 specifically, knew the mile markers and the conditions and the specific character of certain stretches in certain seasons. She talked about the road the way a driver talks about it, with the intimacy of someone who has spent significant time on it. You drive? I asked. I used to, she said. She looked at her coffee. I was on Route 9 for a long time. What happened? She looked up. Her eyes were the most ordinary thing about her, gray, steady. The eyes of a woman who had seen a lot and filed it accurately. I had an accident, she said. A few years back. I don't drive anymore. I'm sorry. Don't be. I still see the road. She looked at the window. That doesn't go away. We talked for another 30 minutes. She told me about Route 9 in winter, the specific ice formation at certain overpasses, the way the crosswind came off the eastern fields between miles 90 and 105, the rest stop at mile 44, where the vending machine on the right had better selection than the one on the left. Detail that only accumulated through years of regular travel on a specific road. When I got up to leave, she said, "That stretch between 140 and 155, there's been an ice advisory tonight. They hadn't posted it yet when I came through. Reduce speed through that section." "How do you know that if you haven't been driving?" I asked. She smiled. "I told you. I still see the road." I drove. At mile 140, I reduced my speed. The road between 140 and 155 had a film of ice on it. The specific invisible ice that forms when the temperature drops faster than the road surface can adjust. I went through it at 40 miles an hour, carefully, and came out the other side without incident. The ice advisory was posted on the state road system at 3:47 am. The timestamp was visible on the display at the next fuel stop. I had been through the affected stretch at 3:20 am, 27 minutes before the advisory was official. In the morning, because I am the kind of person who does this, I went back to the truck stop. I talked to the night shift waitress who had been on when I was there. "The woman in the booth near the back," I said. Dark jacket, gray eyes, about 40. She was there around 2:30. The waitress looked at me with the expression of someone deciding something. "Linda," she said. "She's a regular?" "She was," the waitress said carefully. "She's been coming in for years. Same booth, same coffee." She paused. "I've worked this shift for 8 years. Linda was here when I started. I've never asked her about it. Some things you don't ask about on this shift. She told me she had an accident on Route 9. The waitress nodded slowly. "Linda Marsh. She ran Route 9 for 15 years. She had an accident at mile 147 in 2003. She didn't." The waitress stopped. "She didn't make it. Mile 147. In the center of the ice stretch she had warned me about. Linda Marsh had died at mile 147 in 2003. She had been at the truck stop at 2:30 am in the year 2023, 20 years later, holding her coffee in both hands and looking at the road through the window. I sat for a long time with this information. Then I drove Route 9 again that night, and the night after, and the night after that. I stopped at the truck stop at 2:30 am each time. She was there twice more. Same booth, same coffee, same gray eyes. We talked about the road. She gave me 3 more advisories over those 2 nights. Ice, a detour, a section of uneven surface from a patch that had lifted. Each one was accurate. Each one got me through something I might otherwise have hit wrong. I think Linda Marsh is still running Route 9. I think the accident at mile 147 in 2003 changed the form of her running, but not the fact of it. I think she sits in the warm booth at 2:30 am and talks to the drivers who are heading into conditions she knows about, because she knows that road the way you know a road after 15 years, and you do not stop knowing it just because certain things stop. The knowledge stays. The care stays. Some drivers never leave their roads. Dispatch kept sending me to the same haunted highway the first 3 times I drove Caldwell Road. I thought it was coincidence. The 4th time I started paying attention. By the 8th time I had a theory, and by the 12th time I had confirmation of enough of the theory to write this account. Caldwell Road is a county road in the hill country north of Farrell. A 2-lane road, 12 miles long, that connects the main highway to a cluster of agricultural facilities in the Northern Valley. I had no reason to know it existed before my company started routing me through it. I drove county roads all the time. This one was unremarkable in its physical character. 2 lanes, some curves, a single bridge over a small creek at mile 7. The first time I drove it, in February, I noticed that the road felt wrong in the way that certain roads feel wrong, a quality of attention, a sense of being observed that I associated with isolated stretches and usually dismissed as the projection of a tired mind. I noted it and forgot it. The second time, in March, I noticed that the road felt wrong in exactly the same way as the first time. Not similar, but identical. The same quality of wrongness at the same points along the road. The same sense of attention intensifying at the bridge at mile 7, and then releasing after mile 10. The third time I confirmed that the experience was consistent and location-specific. The fourth time I started looking at what happened at the bridge. The bridge at mile 7 of Caldwell Road was a standard county bridge, concrete, low railing, spanning perhaps 50 feet of creek. Nothing unusual about its construction. But at the bridge, on every pass, my dashboard electronics produced a brief anomaly. The clock display flickered. The GPS briefly lost signal. The cab temperature readout registered a drop of several degrees for approximately the time it took to cross the bridge span. These anomalies were individually explainable. Collectively, repeated on every pass, they built to something I could not explain away. After the 6th routing to Caldwell Road, I raised it with my dispatcher, a practical woman named Carol, who had been routing trucks for 18 years and who I trusted to give me a straight answer. "Why do I keep getting Caldwell?" I asked. "It's the most efficient connection to the Northern Valley cluster," she said. "Given your load type and timing, it routes you there most nights." "Are other drivers running it?" A pause. "Less often. You get it most." She paused again. "Is there a problem with the road?" I described the bridge anomalies. She was quiet for long enough that I knew the silence meant something. "I'll look at alternate routing," she said. She didn't say anything else about it. The next dispatch sent me to Caldwell Road. I have come to believe that the routing was not entirely Carol's decision, that something about the alignment of my truck, my schedule, my specific presence on the road, was being factored into the dispatch by something other than the routing algorithm. I have no proof of this. What I have is the 12th time. The 12th time on Caldwell Road, at the bridge at mile 7, my truck's engine cut out. Not gradually. Not with warning. Cut out. Full power loss. Engine dead, all electronics dark. Rolling forward on momentum toward the bridge. I have 12 years of reflex. I steered to the shoulder before the momentum gave out, set the brake. Sat in the dead cab in the complete silence of a suddenly engineless truck on a dark road. And then I heard it. From under the bridge. From the creek below. A sound that I will not describe further than to say, it was a human sound, it was distressed, and it was real. I got out of the truck. I walked to the bridge railing. I looked over. In the creek below, in the dark, a man was in the water. He had been in the water for some time. I could tell from his state that he had not just fallen, that he had been there long enough to be in serious hypothermic danger. He was conscious, but not by much. I got down the embankment. I got him out. I had a thermal blanket in my emergency kit. I called 911 from a signal that should not have existed on Caldwell Road, but existed. Clearly and strongly in that moment. The paramedics came. The man was treated. He survived. When I walked back to my truck after the ambulance left, the engine started on the first try. I drove Caldwell Road to my delivery and thought about 12 runs. about the specific repeated routing that had put me on this road more than any other driver. About an engine that chose mile 7 to cut out, the precise location where a man in a creek would not be visible from the road without stopping. About what Carroll's routing algorithm was actually optimizing for on the nights it sent me to Caldwell. I think the road knew. I think Caldwell Road, which is old enough to have carried many things in its time, which has a bridge at mile 7 that briefly confuses clocks and GPS signals, knew that a man was going to be in that creek on that night, and that a truck needed to stop there, and that the driver of that truck needed to be someone who would get out and look over the railing rather than calling in an engine fault and waiting for a tow. I have been routed to Caldwell Road 11 times since. Nothing has cut out at the bridge. But I always check the creek as I cross. The road is asking me to check. I check. Zevany, the black semi behind me, never showed up on radar. I first noticed it at mile 40. A black semi, no markings, no livery, running lights only, the dark configuration of a truck that does not want to be identified, sitting approximately 400 feet behind me in the right lane of the northbound interstate. I noticed it because I do not usually have company on the 2 am stretch of I-7 North, which is a sparsely trafficked corridor at that hour, and a truck at 400 feet is close enough to be present without being dangerously close. I noted it and moved on. Traffic is traffic. At mile 60, it was still there. 400 feet, exactly, I had adjusted my speed twice, once up, once down. And the black semi had adjusted to match both times, maintaining its precise 400-foot gap. This is the behavior of cruise control following a set gap, which adaptive cruise systems do, and I assumed that was what I was seeing. At mile 80, I moved to the left lane to pass a slower vehicle. The black semi did not move. It maintained the right lane, dropped back to approximately 600 feet while I was in the left lane passing, and when I returned to the right lane, it closed to 400 feet. Not adaptive cruise. A driver making choices. At mile 95, I had a call from a state police officer, a roadside check on a northbound truck that matched my description. He asked my position. I gave it. He asked if I had seen a black semi running without markings in my vicinity. Behind me, I said. About 400 feet. He told me to hold my position if possible. He was coming from mile 100 northbound. I slowed. The black semi slowed. I maintained 60, slow for the interstate but legal. The black semi maintained 60, 400 feet back. The state police cruiser passed me at mile 98, going south. He was doing a U-turn from his northbound position. His lights came on. I watched in my mirrors as he approached the black semi. He drove through it. I saw this clearly. The cruiser, lights blazing, moving toward the black semi at a closing speed that should have resulted in him pulling in behind it or the semi pulling over. Instead, the cruiser passed through the space where the semi was and continued south. In my mirror, the black semi was still there, 400 feet back. The officer called me. "I don't see a black semi," he said. "I'm at your 6, northbound. The road behind you is empty." "It's right there," I said. 400 feet. Running lights, no markings. "My radar shows nothing," he said. "My eyes show nothing. What are you seeing?" "A truck," I said. "Right behind me." He paced me for 10 miles, confirming in 3 more calls that his radar and his eyes showed nothing behind me. I watched the black semi maintain its 400-foot gap for all 10 of those miles. At mile 110, the officer turned off, and I was alone again with whatever was behind me. I drove to mile 140, which was my fuel stop. I pulled off. The black semi passed me, the first time it had moved from its following position, and I watched it go, passing my pull-off in the right lane, driving north at exactly 60 miles per hour. No deviation, until it was too far north to be visible. I called the fuel stop attendant over. "That black semi that just passed, did you see it?" He looked at the northbound lane. "Empty. What semi?" I have asked drivers and officers and anyone who was on that road that night. No one saw the black semi except me. The dashcam footage from my cab, which I reviewed the following morning, showed the northbound road clearly in the rear camera for the entire run. The road behind me, in the footage, was empty. I have thought about what follows without being visible, about what chooses a 400-foot gap and maintains it precisely for 100 miles, about what has no radar return and leaves no camera trace and is visible to the driver being followed and to no one else. I have a theory that I don't enjoy, but that I can't dismiss, that there is a category of thing that attaches itself to trucks on long night runs and follows at 400 feet. Not threateningly, not maliciously, but with the focused attention of something that is either monitoring or accompanying. The officer's radar saw nothing. My camera recorded nothing. I saw it clearly for 100 miles. It passed me at mile 140 and drove north into the dark. I have since met 2 other drivers who describe an identical experience on different roads. A black, unmarked semi, running lights only, 400 feet back, invisible to radar and camera, visible to the driver being followed. We do not know what it is. We have agreed on this. It does not cause harm. It does not approach. It does not interfere. It follows. For as long as it follows at exactly 400 feet. And then one day it passes you and goes on ahead. I think it is the road's way of telling you that you are not alone on it, that something else is running the same direction, in the same dark, at the same speed. I was not alone that night. Whatever was at 400 feet made sure of that. Wait, I picked up a hitchhiker, then found her missing poster. She was standing at the rest stop exit at mile 55 on Route 12, not hitchhiking formally, standing near the exit lane with her hand half raised, the gesture of someone who was asking rather than demanding. I have a policy against hitchhikers that I have maintained for 9 years. I broke it because it was raining hard, and she was not wearing a jacket, and the nearest town was 20 miles, and it was 1 a.m. She got in without the excessive gratitude that sometimes accompanies desperation. She said, "Thank you." She settled in the seat. She looked at the road. Her name was Claire. She told me this when I asked, without hesitation, the way people give their real name when they don't have a reason not to. She was 17, which she told me also without hesitation, and she had the composure of someone older than that, the stillness of a person who had been in difficult situations before and knew how to be present in them without amplifying them. "Are you all right?" I asked. "Better now," she said. "It's cold out there." She was wet and cold, and she warmed up over the first 20 miles without drama. She looked at the road the way a person looks at something they need to think about. I turned the heat up. I did not ask where she was going beyond the initial question, which she answered with north, and I accepted that because it was 1 a.m. and north was where I was going. We talked. She was easy to talk to, a specific quality of attention, the kind that makes the other person speak more honestly than they intended. She asked about driving, about the life of the road, about what you thought about on long night runs. I answered honestly and found myself telling her things I didn't usually tell people, about why I drove, about what I got from the road that I didn't get from being still. She listened to all of it with the focused reception of someone for whom listening was a practiced skill. At mile 90, she said, "This is good." She meant the heater, I thought, or the truck. or the ride. All of those things were good. At mile 110, I pulled into the Garrison fuel stop for my standard fill. I left her in the cab and went in for coffee. The fuel stop had a community board near the entrance, the kind of board that carries local notices and missing pet flyers and the occasional event announcement. I don't usually read community boards. I read this one because something caught my eye, not the full poster immediately, but the photograph. A photograph of a girl, dark-haired, 17, missing, Claire Adler. 17, missing since October 14th. Last seen in the area of Route 12, mile 50 vicinity. October 14th. The date on the poster was 3 weeks prior. I stood at the board for a long time. The photograph was clearly the girl in my cab. The same face, same hair, same particular composure in the eyes. Missing since October 14th. 3 weeks ago. I walked back to the truck. The cab was empty. The passenger seat was dry, not damp from her wet clothes, not warm from her recent occupation. Dry and cold, as though no one had been in it. I stood beside the truck in the rain and looked at the empty seat. I went back to the board. I took a photograph of the missing poster with my phone. I called the number on the poster. It rang twice and was answered by a woman whose voice had the specific texture of 3 weeks of a particular kind of waiting. "Mrs. Adler?" I said. "Yes. I'm calling about your daughter. I think I may have seen her tonight." The sound on the other end of the line was not quite a gasp. "Where? When?" I described the encounter. "Route 12. The rest stop at mile 55. The ride north. The conversation." The woman on the phone was crying by the time I got to the fuel stop, which I understood. 3 weeks. No word. And then a stranger on the phone describing her daughter in the present tense. "She got out at mile 110, she said." "She didn't get out," I said carefully. "I went inside. When I came back, she was gone, but she was in the truck from mile 55 to mile 110. A pause. She stopped. "That's where she went missing. That stretch of road. Between mile 55 and mile 110. She had gone missing on October 14th in the stretch between mile 55 and mile 110. 3 weeks before I picked her up at mile 55, and she rode with me to mile 110. I drove the rest of my run in the particular silence of a person reconfiguring their understanding of something. Not of the road. I had long since made my peace with the road's surprises. Of what it means to be picked up, of what it means to be found, even briefly, by someone going your direction. Claire Adler was found 2 days later, alive, found by hikers in a wooded area off Route 12, approximately 2 miles from the road, in a state of confusion and exposure, but physically intact. She had no memory of the 3 weeks. She was treated and recovered. Her mother called me after the finding. She said Claire remembered a truck. She remembered being warm. She remembered a man who drove north and didn't ask too many questions. She said you had good coffee, her mother told me. I had given her my travel mug at mile 90 when she had said this is good. I had thought she meant the heater. I think something of her had been on that road, moving between mile 55 and mile 110. For 3 weeks. I think it got into my truck on a rainy night at 1 a.m. because it needed the warmth and the direction and the company. I think it rode with me to mile 110, and then, released, somehow, by the movement and the warmth and the honest conversation, found its way back to wherever Claire Adler was waiting to be found. I think about that ride often, about what it means to give a stranger a lift in the rain and not ask too many questions, about what it costs nothing to offer and what that nothing can do. IX. The way station closed 15 years ago. But they still checked my truck. Every driver who runs Route 7 regularly knows about the Harwick Way Station. It is a landmark in the particular way of things that have become landmarks through their absence. A structure that marks a mile by no longer being what it was. The Harwick Station closed in 2008 when the state consolidated its way operations to larger facilities north and south of the corridor. The building still stands, concrete and brick, the kind of construction that outlasts its purpose by decades. But the scales are gone, the booth is dark, and the sign on the approach has read closed for 15 years. I know this. Every driver on Route 7 knows this. You do not have to stop at the Harwick Station. There is no one there to stop for. On the night of March 7th, the closed sign was not lit. The approach lights were on. The building was lit. And standing in the booth, visible through the window, was an inspector. I should have kept driving. The rational response to an approach that you know is decommissioned is to continue past it, because the correct explanation for anomalous lighting at a closed station is a vandal or a utility error or an odd reflection, not an operational station. I pulled in. I want to account for this decision honestly. I pulled in because the station looked operational in every visual detail, and because 11 years of conditioning to stop at an operational way station is not easily overridden by the knowledge that a specific station is closed. The body responds before the mind finishes the argument. The scales looked active. I rolled onto them. The weight display, mounted above the scale, the standard overhead configuration, showed my loaded weight, 41,200 pounds. Correct? A voice from the intercom. Pull forward to the booth. I pulled forward. In the booth was a man, inspector uniform, the tan and green of the State Transport Department, clipboard in hand. He was perhaps 60. With the particular weathered competence of someone who had spent decades in this kind of work. He came to my window. "Paperwork," he said. I gave him my manifest, my operating authority, my medical card, my log. He took them with the practiced efficiency of someone who had examined 10,000 sets of documents and had a specific internal timeline for processing each type. He worked through them without speaking. His pen moved across his clipboard. He checked items I could not see from my window. "You're running a little heavy on the drives," he said. "Not out of compliance, but watch it." "Yes, sir," I said. It was accurate. I had been meaning to address the load distribution before the next trip. He handed my paperwork back. "Log looks good. Route is clear tonight. Watch for ice past mile 140. He initialed something on his clipboard. "You're clear. Safe run." I pulled through. I drove north. At mile 140 there was ice on the road, the kind of thin, invisible ice that forms in the specific temperature conditions of a clear March night, the kind that a driver who had not been warned about it might have taken too fast. I did not take it too fast. I was doing 35, which is what you do when you have been told to watch for ice. In the morning, from my delivery point, I called the State Transport Department's Northern Region office. I asked about the Harwick Way Station on Route 7. "Harwick," the woman said. "That's been closed since '08. "I was checked there last night," I said. A pause. "That's not possible. The facility is decommissioned. No active staff, no operational equipment." "The scales read my weight correctly," I said. "I was given a paperwork check and a road condition advisory for mile 140. Another pause. "Sir, there's no one at Harwick. There hasn't been for 15 years. I have 3 other drivers who run Route 7 and who I trust. I asked each of them, carefully, whether they had ever been checked at the Harwick station. 2 said no, they knew it was closed and drove past. The third, a driver who had been running Route 7 for 20 years, said yes. Once, 2019, same experience. Lights on, booth staffed, full inspection, correct weight, paperwork in order, road advisory. He said the inspector had caught a brake issue he hadn't been aware of. He'd had it serviced before the next run. The Harwick Way Station closed in 2008. The inspectors who worked it, men who had spent careers weighing trucks and checking logs and noting brake wear and advising drivers of conditions ahead, retired or transferred. The work they did, every night for years, the professional weight of that work, I think it stays in the building. I think the Harwick Station on certain nights when a truck that needs checking comes through, does what it was built to do. I was running a little heavy on the drives. I fixed it before the next run. Some inspections you don't skip, even when the station has been closed for 15 years. Especially then. X. The GPS led me to a road every trucker is told to avoid. Every corridor has its road. The one that drivers know about without being told, that gets passed along in diners and fuel stops and in the specific oral tradition of people who spend their lives on a network and accumulate its knowledge collectively. The road is not on any official list. No dispatch system flags it. No GPS refuses to route through it. The knowledge of it exists only in the community of drivers who run the surrounding roads, and it is passed along with the directness of people who have seen what they have seen and want other people to not see it. The road on the northern Route 7 corridor is County Road 11, between mile 78 and mile 91 of the County Road network. It connects two larger routes across 13 miles of hill country, a legitimate road, well-maintained, a logical shortcut between two delivery clusters that every routing algorithm correctly identifies as efficient. Every dispatcher and every GPS in the region recommends it as an alternate when the main route is congested. Every driver who has run it more than once tells other drivers not to. The stories are consistent, which is the thing about the County Road 11 stories. They are not diverse in their details the way folklore is diverse when it mutates across retellings. The County Road 11 stories are the same story, told by different people, across different years. A dark road that gets darker. A sense of being followed that has no visible source. A specific mile, mile 7 of the county road, which puts it at approximately the midpoint of the 13-mile stretch, where drivers report their electronics going wrong, their clocks showing the wrong time, their compasses giving false readings, and what the experienced drivers call the voice, a sound from outside the cab at mile 7 that sounds like a voice and that no one has been able to record or identify. I had heard all of this. I had been told by Pete Caruso, who told me most of what I know about Route 7 and its side roads. Stay off County 11. I had accepted this the way you accept the accumulated wisdom of people who have been somewhere and came back with consistent reports. My GPS sent me to County Road 11 on a Tuesday night in October. Not as a reroute, as the primary route, overriding the highway path I had selected, recalculating to County 11 3 times as I declined the prompt. I had driven this area enough to override the GPS manually, which I attempted to do. The screen showed my manual route, confirmed it, and then, as I drove, recalculated again to County 11. I have never had a GPS insist on a route to this degree. I have had it suggest alternates, recommend reroutes, flag faster options. I have never had it recalculate a route I had manually overridden 3 times and confirmed. I took the turn onto County Road 11. I want to account for this decision the same way I account for all my decisions. I had driven dark roads for 11 years. I had my lights. My load was not exceptional. The road was well maintained by all reports. The stories were from drivers I respected, but I had made my own assessment of risk, and I was willing to know the road for myself. I drove County Road 11. For the first 6 miles, it was exactly what it appeared to be, a county road in hill country at night. Decent surface, mild curves, the dark of a rural road without street lighting, the sense of wrongness that people described. I was looking for it, and I found it at about mile 4, a quality of attention in the air that I had felt on other roads, and that I associated with roads that had accumulated something. At mile 7, my clock reset to 12 of locam. My GPS lost signal. The compass in my dash showed due west when I was heading north. I slowed to 30. I drove. The voice was not a voice the way a human voice is a voice. It was a sound from outside the cab, from the road itself, or from the darkness alongside it, that had the cadence and rhythm of speech without being identifiable as language. The frequency of it was low, felt as much as heard, in the way of sound that the body processes before the mind does. I did not stop. This was a decision I had made before mile 7. Whatever mile 7 produced, I was going to continue through it rather than stop in it, because stopping on County Road 11 at mile 7 was not something I was willing to add to the record. I drove through mile 7 at 30 miles per hour and came out the other side. At mile 8, my clock corrected itself. GP's signal returned. The compass showed north. I drove the remaining 5 miles of County Road 11 without further anomaly and rejoined the main route at the northern junction. At the fuel stop at mile 90 of Route 7, a driver I knew slightly, a man named Harmon who ran the northern cluster, saw me pull in and came over. "You came off County 11, he said. It was not a question. "Yes. How was mile 7? "Like they said," I told him. He nodded. He didn't ask for more detail. "Why'd you go through?" "My GPS sent me," I said. "Kept recalculating to it. Wouldn't take my manual override." Harmon looked at me for a moment. "That's new," he said. "Usually it's a driver choice." He looked at his coffee. "What was your load?" "Medical equipment." I told him. He nodded slowly. "There's a hospital at the north end that's been waiting on a delayed medical shipment for 2 days. County 11 cut 40 minutes off the main route. The delivery was time-sensitive. I had not known the degree of it. Dispatch had noted urgency, but not the specific situation at the receiving hospital. My GPs had known. My GPs had insisted on County Road 11 because County Road 11 was the fastest route to a hospital waiting on equipment. And County Road 11 had let me through. I have thought about this carefully, about what mile 7 of County Road 11 contains and why it allows passage to some trucks and produces the experiences that have given the road its reputation, about whether what drivers call the voice is not a threat but a test, a reading, the way the Harwick station read my weight, a determination of whether the load is worth the route. My load was medical equipment for a waiting hospital. The road read it. The road let me through. I do not drive County Road 11 casually. I do not recommend it. The stories are true. Mile 7 is what the drivers say it is, but I have come to believe that the road is not indiscriminate in what it does at mile 7, that it applies itself to what comes through it and makes a judgment, and that on a Tuesday night in October, with medical equipment for a hospital that had been waiting 2 days, the judgment was, this one goes through. I went through. The equipment arrived. Some roads are difficult because they take their job seriously. That is not a reason to avoid them. It is a reason to be worth the passage.